Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of TEPSA Presents. I'm Todd Neslony, the Director of Culture and Strategic Leadership here at the Texas Elementary Principals and Supervisors Association. We're thrilled to bring you a variety of perspectives over a wealth of topics to keep you going all year long and fill your cup and give you new ideas. When we thought about who we could invite today, there was one name that I was like, if I'm going to start 2022 off on the right foot, I gotta invite my friend Jimmy Casas on. I know many of you here in Texas know who Jimmy is, but Jimmy, for those few who don't, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, welcome. Hello, everyone out there in Texas land and maybe other places as well. And thank you, TEPSA. Thank you, Todd. You guys have been just so great to me. I'm truly grateful. So just like many of you out there, a young man who wanted to be an educator, served in that profession for 26 years, first as a classroom teacher, teaching bilingual education. Started my career in Milwaukee Public Schools, took my first principalship at the age of 26, and served in that capacity for 22 years until retiring now, believe it or not, 5 years ago. Crazy. And now own my own leadership company. So trying to support educators across the country because we know how difficult and challenging that task is, and it's never been challenging than it is in these times. So God bless everyone, and thank you so much for the continued support and allowing me to do what I love to do, right, which is teach. So.
Yep. Well, Jimmy, you forgot to mention you've also got several fantastic books that you've written and they're out there, but we'll get to some of that in a minute. You know, when you and I were talking about what could the topic be today, you know, we thought about, you threw out the idea, you know, why don't we talk about reframing our thinking? Because administrators right now and leaders in any capacity have a lot on their plate and have a lot being thrown at them. So what about reframing our thinking was really resonating with you?
Yeah, I think, Todd, you know, the truth of it is right now, right? We know how exhausting it's been. We know how challenging it's been. We know what happens when people are not sure what to do. Mm-hmm. And I've kind of, you know, obviously spent a lot of time, you know, as you well know, talking with educators and working side by side building leaders, right? And still seeing all the challenges that they're currently facing. You know, obviously for me, I get to walk into a building, spend the day, and then I get to leave. They have to stay with those problems. But it is pretty cool, right, to actually be able to live it side by side with them and be able to have a lot of conversation and be strategic. And what I've learned is this, it's just the thinking behind it, right? It's really kind of reframing the way we see things, the way we talk about things, the way we do things, because the job is already hard enough as it is without us making it more complicated and harder for ourselves. And I'm, you know, I've always been a believer in a positive mindset. I don't think I'm this Pollyannish person. But I do believe that we have to have hope and faith in the work that we're doing every day. We have to continue to believe that we're making a difference. If we don't, then I'm not sure what you're doing here, what I'm doing here, what we're all doing here. And so sometimes people can be critical of me of that, but that's okay, because I always feel like, hey, listen, we all get to choose the type of day we want to have. We get to choose the type of impact we're going to have. And if we're going to make the greatest impact we have, that we have to believe that we can make that impact. And that's just where I start with the reframing. And then we begin to look at school culture specifically, and we look at the leadership within school organizations and districts and so forth, and recognize that it starts with us, right? That we have to take responsibility, as difficult as it is. At the end of the day, people are still looking at superintendents, they're looking at principals, and quite frankly, our students are looking at teachers and saying, okay, you know, and where are we going from here? And so that's kind of where I begin to think about this whole idea of reframing our thinking.
Well, you know, you said something in there about, you know, keeping that hope and that mindset and not being Pollyannish, because what I love about you in our conversations is that is true. You do have that perspective of hope without it being this false reality of what's out there. But so my question for you is, I know you, like anybody else, has had, either way, those days where you're like, is this the career for me? Did I make a wrong choice of being here, or this all feels too much? When you reach that stage, when you reach that moment, what helps you pull it back together so that you can keep that hope, so that you can keep that mindset of why you're there?
Yeah, so the first thing I think about, right, is we all have that potential every day in this work to kind of lose our way. That's just how I reframe it in my head. We're losing our way, right? Because remember when we sat in that interview chair and we talked about all the things we wanted to do and how we were going to make a difference and how we wanted to work with the most struggling learners, right? And we talk about our stories and why we became a teacher and we're energy. And then over time, something begins to happen, right? We don't see those immediate results, right? That's what's hard about our profession. We're not always going to see it right away. And that's where I kind of go back to that hope and faith. Look, you got to believe what you're doing is making a difference. You may not see it today, but you got to believe there's going to be a difference down the line. If you quit on a kid, right? Or if you quit on a colleague, well, then you know you didn't make a difference. Yeah. So I think the first thing we have to begin to do is just be really intentional. I think that's where you just really begin is, look, we got to look at opportunities and see everything as an opportunity, be really intentional. And I still think it goes back to those human connections, right? We know relationships are the most important thing. It's investing our personal time in other people to really get to understand their story. I talk a lot about the why, but not like Simon Sinek's why, right? That's part of it. Why did we go in the profession? Why do we do what we do? In other words, what's our purpose? But more of the why of why do people behave the way they behave? Because to me, culture is about behavior. And if we can begin to understand that story and understand why people behave the way they behave, then we're not going to judge them as much, right? And so I try to be realistic. It's funny you said that because, again, I am realistic. It's okay, listen, to have bad days. You're going to have moments that you're going to doubt yourself. I think that's normal. Yeah. The problem begins to happen is when we get into this big, oh, woe is me, right? And everything becomes, oh, I'm so tired. I'm so exhausted every day. Look, if you're tired, 30 straight days in a row, something's not right. Okay. Something's not right. So at some point we got to regain control, that reframe our thinking and start to change our own behavior to get a better result. We don't have to fix anything. We don't have to solve any problems, but I do believe that if we look at our own behaviors, we look at our own processes, we look at the way we are intentional or not intentional, the way we invest or don't invest, then I think what happens is we actually will at least get a better result. Right? We're not here to solve problems. So I always say to educators, look, take pressure off yourself. I feel like you're trying to fix everything. You're trying to solve every problem. You don't need to. Just change your behavior. That means you're acting in a better way, behaving in a better way, which in other words, you're bringing your best self to school, right? You're living your excellence. And I promise you, you will get a better result, all right, over time, because that is critical in the work that we're doing. So I would say just be really intentional in the work we're doing, invest in people, right? Because I think that's the joy of the work. And hopefully if we look at our own behavior, then we're going to make changes in our own behavior. We'll get a better result every time.
So, one thing I'd love to ask you is, in my head, you're like the culture building king. I mean, you've got a whole book called Culturize. You talk so much about just this excellence and building those relationships. And it's something that comes very naturally to you, which is why I think so many people resonate with what you share. So my question is, a lot of administrators right now are expressing that culture is important to them, but they feel like they've used everything in their tool chest and it's only January and they have several more months and they're focusing on those relationships, but the baggage or the emotions of the teachers are putting them at a standstill where they're not quite sure what else to do to build people up. Seeing how things have played out over the last 2 years and you being in multiple schools and districts across the country, what advice would you have for school leaders right now to keep them focused, but not feeling like they're just hitting a brick wall and not getting anywhere and their people are tired and they don't know what else to do?
Yeah, Todd, here's what I think has happened. At least, again, these are just my opinions based on my observations and my conversations, but I do think there's a trend. Certainly there's been a shift, right? And I think what happened in the beginning when initially when COVID hit and the pandemic hit, there was a lot of unknowns and kind of people thought, okay, we're going to get through this and everything's going to get back to normal. But we went into the fall that first year, right? After it started in March, we went into the fall. As the year kept going on, I think people started realizing, oh my God, we're in this for the rest of the year, right? Mm-hmm. And that's when we started seeing this shift where people really started getting exhausted. And so what I saw that happen was that our principals, right, they have the right mindset. They want to be servant leaders. They know they have to take care of their staff in order for their staff to take care of their kids. They know that. So they, in my opinion, started diving in, all hands on deck, and doing whatever they could possibly do to support their teachers.
Mm-hmm.
So they started trying to take things away from their teachers and taking out and doing it themselves, right? So we saw a lot of this, covering classes, heck, not just substituting, but actually covering classes, right? Because we had so many people out. They started doing other things in their schools that typically they normally wouldn't do, right? Because they would delegate that to someone. But again, they were worried about people, so they were taking stuff off the plate. Well, the problem is, because they were taking care of their teachers and doing so, we know in the short term, that's fine. Sometimes we need to do those things. But I think what happened is they got caught in there and they couldn't sustain it either.
Yeah.
So now they're exhausted, right? So the question becomes, okay, well, if our building administrators are taking care of our teachers, who's taking care of our building administrators? Yeah. No one really, for the most part, right? So I would say one of the things is they have to reframe again, and they almost have to recalibrate and go back and be a little bit more strategic. So here's what I'm going to say is, quit trying to run the school by yourself. Number one, I think that's always a good strategy in general anyway. But to me, culturizing is about bringing a group of people together. It is about sharing a vision that gives people hope, right? And faith that we'll get through this, we'll figure this out, but we'll do it collectively. So we'll go back and revisit what are our collective commitments and what role will we all play in moving this organization forward, because we're all responsible for that culture and climate of our schools. Yeah. So teachers, I implore you and ask you and beg of you, quit allowing your principals to try to run schools by themselves. Don't allow them to do that. Principals, allow others to help you run the school. Quit acting like you're the only one that can run it, right? And no one else, right? I get it. But it goes back to collective commitments and allowing everybody to be very strategic and making sure that people have a voice, that people have a voice in the decisions that are being made, the directions we're going to go, the way the support's going to look like, et cetera, all those things that we know are critical and important. But again, it's our job to make sure that at the end of the day that we go back is that building principals cannot run a building effectively over a long period of time if they are constantly what I call in the fire, right? If you think about it in leadership, you've got like a 50,000 foot view, a 25,000 foot view, and a 10,000 foot view. 10,000 means you're down, boots on the ground. You're in the fire. You're down with your staff, sleeves rolled up. That's fine. You can go into the cafeteria and help serve food. You can do all these things, cover classes, supervise every morning for an hour in the hallway, whatever you got to do. But you can't sustain that over a long period of time and run a building, right? Mm-hmm. Building leaders have to be at this level the majority of the time. It's okay to go down in the fire for a while, but it's while you're in the fire, that's where I say you got to work on your people. In other words, look at those 4 sets. Is it their mindset you got to work on? Is it their skill sets? Is it a strat set, right? Their strategies? Or is it a core set, right? Do they not have the right core? They're kind of losing their way. So I would say just be very intentional in going back and taking that larger global view again, bringing a group of people together and allowing them to help you lead the organization and share all the issues that are happening so it doesn't land on one person or the same people over and over.
Man, there's some good stuff here, Jimmy. I feel like I'm going to have to go watch this again and again because there's so many nuggets in there that I want to take and write down later. But as we close out this conversation, Jimmy, knowing that the majority of the viewership of this is going to be administrators, school leaders, aspiring leaders in Texas, and they love you here. So what parting words do you have for administrators as they go to the second semester?
Yeah, the first thing I'd say is, like we always say, is number one, remove some of the guilt, right? Give yourself a little bit of grace. But what I am going to ask people to do is you got to be very intentional in getting up and going to work with a sense of purpose. What is today? What is one thing I'm going to accomplish today? And make sure that gets accomplished. So at least at the end of the day, when you go home, you actually have something to show for. I had a win today. Yeah, my day sucked today, but I had a win. And let me tell you about that win, right? And I think usually those one things do go back to connections, whether that's getting into more classrooms, whether that's sitting down and having a heart-to-heart conversation with a teacher and just reminding them how awesome they are, but why they're awesome and why you like their lesson, or calling parents and saying, I want to tell you specifically about your student, because that means you know the student. You've gotten to know them. It isn't, hey, your kid's doing great. No, I want to know why they're doing great. So get to know more kids' names, right? Be very intentional in your engagement. But whatever that goal is, but go to work every day, just one thing that you're going to accomplish. So you know at the end of the day, you can walk home and feel really good about yourself. Say, you know what? I got a win today. And now I can at least talk about that win, because people, the job is difficult. We knew that when we went into the profession, right? This isn't a surprise that it was going to be challenging. It was going to be difficult. But Todd, you know this. Every principal I speak today will always say what? Jimmy, 80, 90%, somewhere in that range they'll say what? The love 80 to 90% of my job. I love everything about it. It's the 10% I hate. And yet here we are. If that's true, then why is this job so not a good job, right? It's because they have to reframe it. And so that's what I would say to them. And that's what I would encourage and support. But at the end of the day, you choose. You choose. And that's the bottom line. You are responsible for your own morale. We're all responsible for morale, and quit owning other people's morale. What you own is your behavior, but not other people's morale. Okay? So that's what I'd say.
Good stuff. Jimmy, I'm so excited we got to start out the year with you. Thank you so much for sharing some time with TEPSA today. We encourage everybody to check out all of our past TEPSA Present episodes on our podcast, TEPSA Talk, or on our YouTube page. We'll see you again in a couple weeks with another brand new episode of TEPSA Presents.
God bless.